I'm Madison, 32, and literally last weekend my rep as the family's invisible fixer, yeah, it totally backfired. The Chicago apartment I'd worked my butt off to buy, my one solid piece of independence, blew up into a full-on family meltdown at our so-called happy reunion dinner. My parents, who I'd always known favored my sister Brittany, straight up demanded I sell my place to bail her out of her messy divorce. When I clapped back, refusing to give up what I'd earned, the room went dead silent. "You're choosing a building over your own family," my mother screamed, with everyone, Brittany, my dad, even my aunt, staring like I'd betrayed them. But here's the tea. Their shade didn't break me, it lit a spark. I'm not just pushing back, I'm about to flip the script and change everything. A quick note, this story is copyrighted by the YouTube channel Guest Stories. Reposting, revoicing, or editing this content without permission constitutes copyright infringement. Thank you for respecting original creative work. Now back to the story. My hands gripped the edge of my dining chair, the wood creaking under my fingers as I tried to keep my voice steady. The restaurant's dim lighting cast long shadows across the table, making my parents' faces look sharper, angrier. My mother, Linda, leaned forward, her pearl necklace glinting as she pointed at me. "Madison, this isn't just about Brittany's divorce, it's about loyalty." Her voice was low, almost a hiss, like she was daring me to argue. My father, Richard, sat back, arms crossed, his jaw tight, letting her take the lead as usual. Brittany, sitting across from me, didn't even look up from her phone, her manicured nails tapping the screen like this whole scene was beneath her. I'd driven 3 hours from Chicago to this suburban steakhouse in Indiana for the annual family dinner, a tradition I'd come to dread. The smell of grilled meat and red wine hung heavy in the air, mixing with the tension that had been simmering since I walked in. I'd barely set my purse down before the questions started. None about my life, my job as a financial analyst, or the fact that I'd just landed a major client at work. No, it was all about Brittany. Her divorce, her struggles, her need for cash, fast. And now this ultimatum: sell my apartment, the one I'd scraped and saved for over 8 years, to cover her legal fees and settlement. "Do you know how much Brittany's going through?" my mother pressed, her eyes narrowing. "She's your sister, Madison. You have that fancy place all to yourself. What's stopping you?" I swallowed hard, my throat dry despite the untouched glass of water in front of me. My apartment wasn't just a place. It was my sanctuary, my proof I could build something without their approval. I'd bought it 2 years ago, a sleek one-bedroom in Lincoln Park, with floor-to-ceiling windows that caught the city's glow at night. Every penny came from my savings, my late nights crunching numbers, my sacrifices. They didn't know that. They never asked. "I'm not selling," I said, my voice quieter than I wanted but firm. My mother's fork clattered against her plate. My father's chair scraped as he leaned forward, finally breaking his silence. "You're being selfish," he said, his tone clipped, like he was scolding a child. "We raised you better than this." Brittany finally looked up, her blue eyes cold. "You've always been like this, Maddie," she said, using the nickname I hated. "Acting like you're above us." She flicked her blonde hair over her shoulder, a gesture so practiced it made my stomach twist. I wanted to scream that I'd never been above them, just invisible. For years, I'd been the one picking up the pieces, covering Brittany's bounce checks in college, smoothing over family arguments, even helping my parents with their mortgage when Dad's business tanked. But all they saw was Brittany, their golden child, who could do no wrong even when her life was a revolving door of bad decisions. 2 failed businesses, a string of boyfriends, and now a divorce from a guy she married after 6 months. The table felt like a courtroom, their eyes judging me. My aunt, sitting at the end, gave me a sympathetic glance but said nothing. I could feel my pulse in my fingertips, my heart pounding as I pushed back my chair. "I worked for that apartment," I said, looking straight at my mother. "It's mine. Brittany's mess isn't my responsibility." The silence that followed was suffocating. My mother's lips pressed into a thin line and my father shook his head, like I'd failed some unspoken test. Brittany smirked, scrolling her phone again, as if my defiance was just a minor inconvenience. I grabbed my coat, my hands trembling, and walked out into the chilly night, the restaurant door slamming behind me. In my car I sat for a moment, staring at the steering wheel, my breath fogging the windshield. I'd always known they favored Brittany, but this, demanding I give up my home, my stability, for her chaos. It was a line I wouldn't cross. As I started the engine, my phone buzzed, a text from my mother. "We'll talk about this later. You're making a mistake." I tossed the phone onto the passenger seat, my resolve hardening. They thought they could guilt me into submission, but they were wrong. This wasn't the end. It was the beginning of me fighting back. The highway stretched out, dark and empty, ahead of me as I merged onto I-90, the city lights of Chicago still hours away. My knuckles whitened on the steering wheel, the hum of the engine, the only sound breaking the silence in my car. That text from my mother burned in my mind. "We'll talk later," like this was just a hiccup, like I hadn't just drawn a line in the sand. But as the miles ticked by, the anger simmered into something deeper, a flood of memories rushing in unbidden. It wasn't just tonight's demand, it was a lifetime of being pushed aside, of my efforts dissolving into nothing, while Brittany's spotlight never dimmed. Sitting there in the driver's seat, the dashboard glow casting shadows on my face, I let myself dive into those old wounds, piecing together how we'd gotten here, realizing for the first time that this favoritism wasn't random. It was a pattern etched into every family moment. It started small, back when we were kids, but even then, the imbalance was clear. I remembered my 8th birthday, the one where I'd begged for a science kit because I'd aced my school's math fair with a project on fractions. I'd built this model out of cardboard and string explaining how parts made holes, and my teacher had pinned a blue ribbon on my shirt. I came home buzzing, clutching that ribbon like it was gold. But when I showed it to my parents, my mother glanced up from folding laundry and said, "That's nice, honey," without even putting down the shirt in her hands. My father, reading the newspaper at the kitchen table, grunted something about "good job" and turned the page. No cake, no fuss, just a quiet dinner where the conversation shifted to Brittany's dance recital the next day. She was 6, twirling in a pink tutu she'd picked out herself, and they gushed over her for hours, planning to video it, buy flowers. I sat there, picking at my peas, the ribbon forgotten in my pocket, feeling like my achievement was just background noise. By high school, it had hardened into routine. I busted my ass to make valedictorian, staying up until 2 a.m. most nights, flashcards scattered across my desk, my eyes burning from the lamp's glare. The day the list came out, I ran home, slamming the door behind me, waving the printed announcement. "Mom, Dad, I did it!" My voice echoed in the hallway. My mother was in the living room helping Brittany with her prom dress fittings. Brittany, who was a junior and had just been crowned homecoming queen despite her C average. Mom looked up, her pins paused mid-hem. "Valedictorian? Oh, Madison, that's wonderful." But her smile was quick, distracted, and she turned back to Brittany, adjusting the strap. "Does this look even, sweetie?" Dad came in from the garage, wiping oil from his hands, and patted my shoulder. "Proud of you, kiddo." That was it. No celebration dinner, no proud posts on the family fridge. Meanwhile, Brittany's homecoming win? They threw a backyard barbecue, invited neighbors, my father grilling burgers while toasting her natural charm. I helped set up the tables, forcing a smile as guests cooed over her crown, my own news mentioned in passing like an afterthought. College amplified it all. I majored in finance at Northwestern on a partial scholarship I'd earned through essays and interviews, working part-time at a campus bookstore to cover the rest. My junior year, I landed an internship at a top firm in Chicago, analyzing market trends, my reports getting praise from senior analysts. I called home excited, describing how I'd spotted a dip in stocks that saved the team thousands. My father's response? A chuckle over the phone. "Sounds complicated. Good for you." Click. But when Brittany flunked out of her community college art program, after changing majors 3 times, they rallied. They drove up to help her move back home, my mother hugging her tight, saying, "It's okay, baby, you'll find your path." They enrolled her in online courses, paid for supplies, celebrated her first B like it was a Nobel. I graduated summa cum laude, walking across that stage in my cap and gown, scanning the crowd for them. They were there but late, and afterward the focus was Brittany's new job at a boutique. Minimum wage, but so creative. My diploma? Hung in my tiny apartment, unnoticed by them. Even into adulthood, the pattern persisted. At 25, I got my first big promotion at the firm, becoming a lead analyst with my own team. I invited them to Chicago for a visit. hoping to show off my life. We met at a nice cafe near my office, the clink of coffee cups filling the air. I slid my business card across the table, beaming. This means longer hours, but the responsibility is huge. My mother nodded, sipping her latte, then launched into Brittany's latest venture, a yoga studio she was investing in with borrowed money. Dad asked about Brittany's classes, her clients, while my news faded. They never toured my office, never asked details. But when Brittany's studio failed 6 months later, racking up debt, they bailed her out, no questions, praising her entrepreneurial spirit. I offered advice once over a family call suggesting budgets. Brittany snapped, "Not everyone is a numbers nerd like you," and my parents laughed it off, changing the subject. These memories played like a slideshow in my mind as I drove, each one a pinprick building to this ache in my chest. I'd always rationalized it, maybe they just worried more about Brittany, because she needed it. But tonight, demanding my apartment, it clicked. I was the reliable one, the afterthought, expected to sacrifice because I could handle it. My foot eased off the gas, the car slowing as tears blurred the road signs. I wiped them away with the back of my hand, gripping the wheel tighter. How many times had I swallowed the hurt, smiled through their dismissals? My achievements, graduations, promotions, that apartment, were mine alone, celebrated in solitude with a glass of wine and a quiet pat on my back. Brittany's whims, parades. It fueled a quiet resentment I'd buried deep, but now, with the city's skyline faintly visible on the horizon, it surfaced raw and real. This wasn't just favoritism. It was erasure. And as I pulled into my parking garage, the engine ticking cool, I knew I couldn't let it continue. Not anymore. Unlocking my apartment door that night, the familiar click echoed in the hallway, a small sound that grounded me after the chaos of the drive. I stepped inside, kicking off my shoes by the entryway mat, the cool hardwood floor soothing against my socks. The place was dark, except for the faint city light filtering through the blinds, casting stripes across the living room. I didn't turn on the lamps right away. Instead, I leaned against the door, closing my eyes, the weight of the evening pressing on my shoulders. My keys slipped from my hand, clattering to the floor, and I bent to pick them up, my fingers brushing the mail I'd grabbed from the box downstairs. A stack of bills and junk. Nothing from family, thank God. As I straightened, flipping through the envelopes absent-mindedly, that resentment from the car ride bubbled up again, sharper now in the quiet of my own space. This apartment, the one they'd demanded I sell, it wasn't just walls and windows. It was my rebellion, my secret victory, born from a single crystal-clear aha moment years ago that changed everything. Standing there, the envelope edges digging into my palm, I let myself relive it, every detail. Because if I was going to fight them, I needed to remember why this place mattered so damn much. It hit me during my first year out of college, right after that disastrous family visit where my promotion got overshadowed by Brittany's failed yoga studio. I was 23, living in a cramped studio rental on the outskirts of Chicago, the kind with thin walls where you could hear neighbors arguing at all hours. My job as a junior analyst paid okay, enough for rent, groceries, and the occasional takeout, but after sending money home to help with Brittany's emergency that month, some credit card debt she'd racked up on clothes, my bank account was scraping bottom. I sat at my tiny kitchen table, a wobbly IKEA thing, staring at my laptop screen where I'd just transferred the funds. The confirmation email popped up. Transfer complete. My hands hovered over the keys, trembling slightly, and that's when it struck. The aha, like a slap. Why was I always the safety net? They'd never save for me, never celebrate my wins, but they'd drain me dry for her. I slammed the laptop shut, the sound sharp in the empty room, and paced the 5 steps to my window, looking out at the gray skyline. In that moment, raw and alone, I realized, if I didn't build something for myself, something they couldn't touch, I'd be trapped forever, giving pieces of my life away until nothing was left. From there, the struggle kicked in, intense and grinding, every day a battle against doubt and exhaustion. I started small, cutting corners where I could. Mornings, I'd brew cheap coffee at home instead of hitting the cafe, measuring out exactly 2 scoops to make it last. At work, I volunteered for overtime, staying late in the fluorescent-lit office, my eyes straining at spreadsheets while colleagues headed out for happy hours. My fingers would ache from typing, knuckles cracking as I stretched them under the desk. Weekends? No movies or brunches. I'd pick up freelance gigs, analyzing small business finances from my laptop on the couch, the screen's glow the only light as night fell. I opened a secret savings account, one they didn't know about, transferring $50 here, $100 there after each paycheck. The app on my phone became my obsession. I'd check it in bed, the blue light illuminating my face, watching the balance creep up. $500, $1,000, $5,000. But it wasn't easy. There were nights I'd lie awake, staring at the ceiling cracks, second-guessing myself. What if I needed that money for something else? What if they found out and guilted me into handing it over? My stomach would knot, breaths shallow, but I'd clench the sheets in my fists, whispering to myself, "This is for you, Madison. Just you." The real grind came with the denials, sacrifices that tested every ounce of my resolve. Brittany called one month, voice tearful over the phone, saying she needed help with car repairs after a fender bender. I gripped the receiver, my free hand picking at a loose thread on my sweater, heart pounding. "I can't this time," I said, the words tasting like acid. She paused, then exploded. "What do you mean? You're loaded now with that job." I hung up, my hand shaking as I set the phone down, tears stinging my eyes. My parents followed up, emails laced with disappointment. "Family helps family, Madison." I deleted them, fingers hovering before pressing send on my own reply. None. Instead, I funneled that guilt into more savings, skipping vacations, wearing the same coat for 3 winters, its lining frayed from use. At the grocery store, I'd stand in aisles, calculator app open, adding up costs to the penny, putting back the name brand cereal for generic. Friends invited me out, I'd decline, citing work, while really curling up with ramen and a book from the library, the pages turning slowly under my lamp. 2 years in, the balance hit $20,000, but doubt crept back fiercer. A market dip at work made me nervous, layoffs rumors swirled, and I watched colleagues pack boxes, their faces pale. I sat at my desk, mouse clicking idly through reports, sweat beading on my forehead despite the AC. Should I cash out, play it safe? No. I doubled down, taking a certification course online, hunched over my screen until my back screamed, passing the exam with flying colors and earning a raise. That bump went straight to savings. By year 5, $50,000. I started researching properties, late-night scrolls on real estate sites, my mouse hovering over listings, heart racing at the prices. Rejections came, banks turned me down for loans twice, citing my age or income stability. I'd crumple the denial letters, fists tight, then smooth them out, filing them away as fuel. Finally, a smaller lender approved, but the down payment wiped me out. Closing day, I sat in the title office, pen in hand, the agent's voice droning terms. My signature shook on the dotted line, ink smudging slightly from my damp palm. And then, success. Massive, hidden, mine. Moving in that first night, boxes stacked haphazardly, I collapsed on the bare floor, back against the wall, a pizza slice in hand. The city hummed outside, lights twinkling like stars. No one knew. Not my parents, not Brittany. I'd told them I was renting nicer. Vague on details. The triumph surged through me, warm and electric, as I unpacked a single mug, placing it in the empty cabinet with care. This was independence. Locks I controlled, space I earned. Over the next years I made it home, hanging curtains with steady hands, choosing paint colors that calmed me, building equity with each mortgage payment deducted automatically. My secret grew, a shield against their dismissals. Now, back in the present, flicking on the kitchen light, I poured a glass of water, sipping slowly, the cool liquid steadying me. This place wasn't for sale. It was my proof, my aha, forged in sweat and silence. If they wanted a fight, they'd get one, but on my terms. That resolve lingered as I set the glass down on the counter, the water rippling slightly from the motion. I glanced at the clock, past midnight, and rubbed my eyes, the day's exhaustion finally catching up. I flipped off the light, padding to my bedroom in the dark, the floorboards creaking under my feet. Slipping under the covers, I stared at the ceiling, my mind racing despite the fatigue. The fight was coming, but to really understand why it hit so hard, why their demand felt like the breaking point, I need to go back just a bit, to the day before that disastrous dinner. It was a Friday, the eve of our annual family gathering, and everything in my life was teetering on the edge of change. My fingers twisted the sheet as I lay there remembering, the memory pulling me in like a current, vivid and unrelenting. That morning, my alarm buzzed at 6:30 a.m., the sharp tone cutting through the quiet of my apartment. I reached out blindly, slapping the phone silent on my nightstand, then lay there for a second, blinking at the soft light peeking through the blinds. The air smelled faintly of the lavender diffuser I'd plugged in the night before. A small attempt at calm amid the chaos I sensed building. I swung my legs over the side of the bed, feet hitting the rug, and stretched my arms overhead, feeling the pull in my shoulders from yesterday's long hours at the office. Today was big. Huge, actually. As a financial analyst at Harrington and Associates, I'd been grinding on a major client deal for months, poring over projections and risk assessments until my vision blurred. Word around the water cooler was that closing it would mean a promotion to senior analyst, complete with a corner office, a salary bump that could pay off my student loans in half the time, and real influence on the firm's strategy. It wasn't just a step up. It was life-changing, the kind of validation I'd craved but never gotten from home. But as I stood up, shuffling to the bathroom, a knot formed in my stomach. Not from work nerves, but from the looming family dinner tomorrow. I flicked on the bathroom light, the fluorescent bulb humming to life, and stared at my reflection in the mirror. Bags under my eyes, hair a mess from sleep. I turned on the faucet, letting the water run cold before splashing my face, droplets trickling down my chin as I braced my hands on the sink. "You've got this," I muttered to myself, wiping my face with a towel, the fabric rough against my skin. But did I? The promotion felt within reach, but the family stuff? It was already casting a shadow. Brittany's divorce had been the hot topic in our group chat for weeks, her texts whining about lawyer fees, my parents chiming in with sympathetic emojis and promises to figure it out. I'd stayed silent, my thumbs hovering over the keyboard each time, not wanting to get sucked in. Deep down, I knew they'd turn to me eventually. They always did. As I brushed my teeth, foam building at the corners of my mouth, I replayed the last call from my mother 2 days ago, her voice casual at first, then probing. "Madison, how's that apartment treating you? Roomy for one person, isn't it?" I'd changed the subject, but the hint was there, subtle like a gathering cloud. Shaking it off, I headed to the kitchen, pulling a mug from the cabinet and starting the coffee maker. The machine gurgled, the aroma filling the air as I sliced an apple at the counter, the knife's blade sinking cleanly through the fruit. My phone vibrated on the island, an email from my boss Elena. I wiped my hands on a dish towel, picking it up with a mix of excitement and anxiety. "Madison, great work on the Thompson portfolio. Let's chat this afternoon about next steps. Big things ahead." My heart skipped, a smile tugging at my lips as I set the phone down, pouring coffee into the mug, steam rising in curls. This was it. The deal was closing soon, and with it, my shot at the promotion. I sipped the hot liquid, burning my tongue slightly, and leaned against the counter, letting the moment sink in. For once, something was about me, my effort, my future, but the buzz faded as my phone lit up again. This time, a text from Brittany. "Hey sis, need to talk. Divorce is killing me financially. Mom says you might help?" I stared at the screen, my grip tightening on the mug until the handle dug into my palm. "Help? With what? My savings? My home?" I typed a quick "busy at work, talk later," and hit send, my finger pressing harder than necessary. Then came Mom's message. "Family dinner tomorrow. We all need to discuss Brittany's situation. Be there by 5. No question, just expectation." I set the mug down with a clunk, the coffee sloshing over the rim, and rubbed my temples, feeling the headache starting. The annual dinner, always at that same steakhouse, always a showcase for Brittany's dramas while my life got a passing nod. I knew what was coming, the pleas, the guilt trips, the assumption I'd fix it. As I buttered toast, the knife scraping unevenly, my mind raced. Sensing the storm wasn't paranoia, it was experience. Brittany's crisis would dominate, and I'd be expected to sacrifice. Again. I finished breakfast quickly, crumbs scattering as I brushed them off the plate into the sink. In the bedroom, I picked out my outfit, a crisp white blouse and black slacks, professional yet understated. Buttoning the shirt, my fingers fumbled on the third one, frustration building. Why couldn't I just focus on work? The promotion meeting today could seal it. Elena had hinted at it in our last one-on-one, her pen tapping the desk as she praised my analysis. But the family cloud hung heavy. I slipped on my heels, the click against the floor echoing, and grabbed my laptop bag, slinging it over my shoulder. At the door, I paused, hand on the knob, taking a deep breath. The air felt thicker, charged. I could almost hear the arguments tomorrow, the demands, the accusations if I pushed back. Stepping into the hallway, locking the door behind me with a twist of the key, I headed to the elevator, pressing the button repeatedly as if it would hurry things along. My reflection in the metal doors looked determined, but inside reluctance gnawed at me. Preparing for that dinner meant steeling myself for battle, all while chasing this career high. As the doors opened with a ding, I stepped in, the descent mirroring my sinking mood. The brewing storm over Brittany's divorce wasn't just her mess. It was about to crash into my world, testing everything I'd built. Little did I know how far they'd go. That foreboding sense of how far they'd go crystallized the moment I pulled into the steakhouse parking lot the next evening, the gravel crunching under my tires like a warning. I'd spent the previous day at work in a haze, the promotion meeting with Elena unfolding just as I'd hoped. She'd leaned back in her chair, fingers steepled, and said the Thompson deal was locked, with my name at the top for senior analyst once it closed. But the thrill barely registered, overshadowed by the texts piling up on my phone during lunch. Brittany's complaints, Mom's reminders about being on time. Now, here I was, engine idling, as I stared at the restaurant's glowing sign, the scent of exhaust mixing with the faint barbecue smoke wafting from the vents. My hand stayed on the wheel, fingers flexing and unflexing, nails digging half-moons into my palms. I could turn around, drive back to Chicago, pretend car trouble. But no, that would just delay the inevitable, give them more ammo to paint me as unreliable. With a deep breath, I cut the engine, the sudden silence amplifying my heartbeat. Grabbing my purse from the passenger seat, I stepped out, the cool evening air hitting my face, and locked the car with a beep that echoed too loudly. As I walked toward the entrance, my heels clicking on the pavement, I smoothed my dress, a simple black one I'd chosen to blend in, not stand out, and braced myself for the gauntlet inside. Pushing open the heavy wooden door, the warmth and noise rushed over me, clinking silverware, murmured conversations, the sizzle from the open kitchen. The hostess smiled politely, but I waved her off, spotting my family already seated at a corner booth, their faces lit by the pendant lamps overhead. My mother noticed me first, her eyes flicking up from the menu, and she waved with a forced enthusiasm, her bracelet jangling. "Madison, over here!" Her voice carried across the room, drawing a few glances from nearby tables. I forced a smile, weaving through the chairs, my purse strap slipping slightly on my shoulder. As I approached, my father stood halfway, his chair scraping back, and gave me a stiff one-armed hug, his cologne sharp and familiar. "Good to see you, kid," he muttered, patting my back once before sitting down abruptly. Brittany didn't stand. She glanced up from her phone, her lips curving into a half-smile, and scooted over minimally to make room. "Hey sis," she said, her tone casual, like we were old pals catching up. My aunt, Karen, was there too, squeezed in beside Dad, and she offered a warmer nod, her glasses slipping down her nose as she adjusted the. I slid into the booth next to Brittany, the vinyl seat sticking to my legs, and set my purse beside me, folding my hands in my lap to hide their slight tremble. The table was already cluttered with water glasses, bread baskets, and half-empty appetizer plates. Mozzarella sticks, from the looks of it, Brittany's favorite. Before I could even reach for the menu, my mother leaned forward, her elbows on the table, eyes scanning me up and down. "You look tired, Madison? All that city living wearing you out?" It wasn't a question so much as a judgment, her head tilting slightly, brows furrowed in fake concern. I felt my cheeks heat, but I nodded politely, unfolding my napkin to give my hand something to do. "Just a busy week at work," I replied, keeping my voice even, smoothing the cloth over my knees. She hummed, not really listening, and turned to the waiter who appeared at that moment, ordering a glass of Chardonnay for herself without asking if I wanted anything. As the waiter jotted it down and handed me a menu, my father cleared his throat, folding his arms on the table, his watch face catching the light. "So still crunching numbers over there in Chicago?" Must be thrilling, staring at spreadsheets all day. His tone was light, but the sarcasm dripped through, his mouth quirking in a smirk as if sharing an inside joke. Brittany snorted softly beside me, covering it with a sip of her soda, her straw slurping at the bottom. I gripped the menu tighter, the laminated edges biting into my fingers, and forced a chuckle. It's challenging, yeah. Actually, we just closed a big... But he cut me off, waving a hand. Numbers. Never could wrap my head around that stuff. Brittany here, she's got the creative side. Tell Madison about your new project, Britt. He turned to her, his face lighting up, shoulders relaxing as if the conversation had finally gotten interesting. Brittany perked up, setting her phone face down with a deliberate tap, her nails clicking against the screen. Oh, it's this influencer thing. I'm starting a vlog about lifestyle tips, divorce recovery, fashion on a budget, that kind of vibe. She flipped her hair, glancing at me sideways. You should watch, Maddie. Might give you some ideas for, sprucing up. The backhanded compliment landed like a pinch, her eyes flicking to my dress, implying it was drab. I shifted in my seat, the booth feeling narrower, and murmured, "Sounds fun," while inside my thoughts raced. Fun? She'd never held a steady job, always leaping from one passion to another on our parents' dime. My aunt chimed in then, trying to steer things. "Madison, how's the apartment? You must love having your own space." Her voice was genuine, but my mother jumped on it, her wine arriving just in time for her to take a sip before responding. "Yes, that little place, it's cute for one person, I suppose. But honestly, at your age, don't you get lonely? Brittany's always got friends over, even now with everything going on." She reached across to pat Brittany's hand, her rings clinking against the glass. The questions kept coming, each one laced with condescension, like needles under the skin. My father asked about my commute, then dismissed it with, "City traffic? Bet it's a nightmare. We like the quiet suburbs, more family-oriented." He emphasized family, his gaze steady on me, as if hinting I was missing out. Brittany added a gem about my single status. "Still no boyfriend? You work too much, that's the problem. Guys like girls who have time for fun." She laughed lightly, popping a cheese stick into her mouth, chewing with her mouth slightly open. I avoided eye contact, staring at the menu's blurred print, my jaw clenching until it ached. Why did every comment circle back to how my life was lesser, practical but boring, independent but isolated, while Brittany's chaos was vibrant? My aunt tried again. "Madison's doing great on her own," but Mom waved it off. Of course she is, she's always been the responsible one. The word responsible, twisted like a knife, a compliment that felt like a cage, implying I existed to clean up their messes. As the waiter returned for orders, I mumbled mine. "A steak salad, keep it simple," while they fawned over Brittany's choice of lobster tail, Dad saying, "That's my girl, go big." The barrage eased for a breath, but the damage lingered, my appetite gone, stomach churning. I sipped water, the ice clinking against my teeth, wondering how much more I could take before the real storm hit. The waiter had just cleared the appetizer plates, the scrape of porcelain against the tablecloth cutting through the lull in conversation, when my mother set her wine glass down with a deliberate clink, her eyes locking onto mine across the booth. The air in the restaurant felt thicker now, the hum of other diners fading into a distant buzz as she straightened her posture, folding her hands neatly in front of her like she was about to deliver a boardroom presentation. I'd been picking at my salad, the forked tines scraping the bowl aimlessly, my appetite long gone from the earlier jabs, but something in her expression made me set it down, my hand lingering on the utensil as if it could anchor me. Brittany shifted beside me, her knee bumping mine under the table. Not accidentally, I suspected. And my father cleared his throat again, a habit that signaled he was gearing up for something heavy. Aunt Karen glanced between us, her napkin twisted in her lap, sensing the shift, but staying silent. The pendant light above swung slightly from a passing waiter's draft, casting flickering shadows on their faces, making the moment feel even more ominous. This wasn't just more small talk. The condescension had been the warm-up, and now the real conversation was escalating, building toward whatever discussion they'd hinted at in their texts. My mother started slow, her voice measured, like she was explaining something obvious to a slow learner. "Madison, we've been thinking a lot about family lately. With Brittany's divorce, it's been tough on all of us. She paused, sipping her wine, the glass stem pinched between her fingers, lipstick smudging the rim. Brittany nodded vigorously beside me, her eyes welling up on cue, dabbing at them with her napkin corner. "Yeah, Mom," she whispered, voice cracking just enough to tug at sympathies. I felt my stomach tighten, my free hand clenching into a fist under the table, nails digging into my palm. Here it came, the pivot to me, the responsible one. My father leaned forward, elbows on the table, his wedding ring tapping rhythmically against his water glass. "Your sister's in a bind, Maddie. That husband of hers, ex-husband now, left her high and dry. Legal fees are piling up, and she needs a fresh start. We've helped where we can, but—" He trailed off, his gaze steady on me, expectant. I swallowed, my throat dry, and glanced around the table. Brittany's performative sniffle, Mom's calculated calm, Dad's insistent stare, Aunt Karen's averted eyes. "What exactly are you asking?" I said, though I knew, the words coming out flatter than intended. My mother exchanged a look with my father, a silent nod passing between them, before she continued. "Your apartment, Madison. It's a valuable asset. Selling it could cover Brittany's costs, get her back on her feet. It's not like you need all that space, you could rent something smaller, more practical." Her tone was reasonable, almost kind, but the implication hit like a gut punch. My hard-earned home reduced to a disposable fund for Brittany's latest fallout. Brittany chimed in then, her voice gaining strength. "It would mean so much, sis. I'd pay you back, eventually. Promise." She reached for my hand across the table, but I pulled back instinctively, my chair creaking as I shifted away. The escalation was swift, my refusal sparking it like dry tinder. "I'm not selling," I said firmly, meeting my mother's eyes, my voice steady despite the pulse hammering in my ears. "That apartment is mine. I bought it with my money, for my life." The words hung there, and for a beat, silence blanketed the table, broken only by the distant clatter from the kitchen. Then my mother's face hardened, her lips pressing into a thin line, eyes narrowing. "Selfish," she hissed, the words sharp and low. "After everything we've done for you? We raised you, supported you through school." "Supported?" I interrupted, heat rising in my chest, my hands now visible on the table, knuckles white. "I worked for scholarships, part-time jobs. You never." But my father cut in, his voice booming louder than necessary, drawing stares from nearby tables. "Enough. This isn't a debate. Family comes first. If you won't help, you're choosing to walk away from us." Brittany leaned in, her whisper venomous. "You've always been jealous, Maddie, acting like your job makes you better, but when push comes to shove, you're alone in that apartment because no one wants to be around someone so cold." Her words stung, twisting the knife, and I felt tears prick my eyes, but I blinked them back, refusing to let them see. Aunt Karen finally spoke, her voice tentative. "Maybe we can find another way." But my mother waved her off, her chair pushing back slightly as she stood halfway, pointing at me. "No, if Madison won't sell, she's out. No more family support, no more holidays, nothing. We're done carrying her ungrateful attitude." The formal announcement landed like a verdict in a trial I didn't know I was on, her words echoing in my head. Disowned, cut off, for refusing to dismantle my life for theirs. My father nodded solemnly, his arms crossing tighter. "You heard your mother. Sell the place, help your sister, or don't bother coming around anymore." Brittany smirked subtly, folding her arms to mirror him, triumphant. The table felt like it was closing in, the booth walls pressing against my sides, my breath shallow. I pushed my plate away, the utensils rattling, and stood slowly, my legs unsteady but my voice clear. "If that's how it is, fine, but don't pretend this is about family, it's about control." My mother's face flushed, her hands slamming lightly on the table, rattling the glasses. "Get out then. And don't expect us to bail you out when your perfect life crumbles." The finality in her tone sealed it. The escalation complete, from jabs to demands to exile, all in the span of this one dinner. Grabbing my purse, the strap catching on the booth edge, I turned and walked away, their whispers following me like ghosts. The door swung shut behind me, the night air a shock to my heated skin. In the car, hands shaking on the wheel, the full weight hit. Disowned, alone, but strangely a spark of freedom ignited amidst the pain. The spark of freedom flickered uncertainly as I merged onto the highway, the taillights ahead blurring through the tears I finally let fall, wiping them away with the heel of my hand to keep the road clear. The drive back to Chicago stretched endless, the radio off, leaving only the whoosh of passing cars and my ragged breaths to fill the void. By the time I pulled into my building's garage 3 hours later, my eyes burned raw and my body ached from tension. But that initial defiance had cooled into a numb resolve. I grabbed my purse, the zipper catching on my sleeve as I slung it over my shoulder and headed to the elevator, pressing the button with a jab. The doors closed with a soft thud, and I leaned against the wall, closing my eyes, replaying the dinner's final blows. Their faces twisted in judgment, the word disowned echoing like a slammed door. Little did I know the real assault was just beginning, waiting in the form of a certified envelope that would unleash a campaign of harassment I never saw coming. As the elevator dinged open on my floor, I stepped out, keys jingling in my hand, unaware that the next few minutes would shatter any illusion of escape. Unlocking my door, the familiar scent of home, faint lavender from the diffuser, mixed with the takeout I'd left in the fridge, should have been a comfort, but tonight it felt hollow. I kicked off my heels by the entryway, the shoes tumbling sideways, and flicked on the light, illuminating the mail slot's overflow on the floor. Bills, ads, and one thick manila envelope that stood out, stamped with certified mail in red. My heart stuttered as I bent to pick it up, the paper cool and heavy in my hands, addressed from a law firm in Indiana, Harrison & Lowe, attorneys at law. The return address included my parents' names as plaintiffs. Plaintiffs? Against me? I tore the seal with trembling fingers, the rip echoing in the quiet apartment, and pulled out the stack of documents, my eyes scanning the bold header. Complaint for breach of familial duty and request for injunctive relief. The words swam for a second before sharpening into horror. They were suing me. Suing me to force the sale of my apartment, claiming it as family property due to some twisted argument about emotional support and past contributions. My knees buckled slightly, and I sank onto the couch, the cushions dipping under me, papers scattering across my lap. The lawsuit detailed it all: accusations of ungrateful abandonment, demands for me to liquidate the property and transfer funds to Brittany, even threats of liens if I didn't comply. My mother's signature at the bottom, neat and precise, stared back like a betrayal etched in ink. My father's scrawl beside it, bold and unapologetic. Brittany was listed as a co-plaintiff, her name typed cleanly. I flipped through the pages, my breath coming in short gasps, fingers creasing the edges as I gripped them tighter. How could they? This wasn't just words at a dinner table. This was legal warfare, dragging my life into courtrooms and records. The attached affidavit from my mother claimed I'd promised to help family in need, twisting casual conversations into binding vows. My pulse thundered in my ears, the room spinning slightly as I set the papers down, my hands pressing against my temples, elbows on my knees. The harassment had started subtly in the days since the dinner, texts from unknown numbers calling me selfish, Brittany's social media posts vague booking about betrayal. But this was escalation, a calculated strike to break me. Almost on cue, my phone buzzed on the coffee table, the screen lighting up with an unknown caller. I hesitated, thumb hovering, but answered, my voice hoarse. Hello? A man's voice, professional and detached. Madison Ellis? This is Greg Harrison from Harrison & Lowe. You've been served notice of the suit filed by your parents. We're seeking immediate compliance to avoid further action. I sat up straighter, the couch fabric scratching against my dress. Further action? You're suing me over my own property? He paused, papers rustling on his end. Your family alleges financial entanglement and moral obligation. We can discuss settlement. Sell the asset, remit proceeds to your sister. My free hand clenched into a fist, nails biting skin. No, this is insane. I'll fight this. He chuckled dryly. Expected as much. Expect process servers if needed, and a word of advice: family matters get ugly in court. The line went dead, leaving me staring at the phone, the screen fading to black. But it didn't stop there. The waves crashed in rapid succession. Minutes later, another buzz, an email from my boss, Elena, forwarded from HR. Subject: concern regarding personal matters. I opened it, scrolling with a swipe, my stomach dropping. An anonymous tip had been sent to my workplace, claiming I was unstable due to family disputes, suggesting I might be a liability with client funds. Attached was a screenshot of Brittany's post, her whining about sisters who abandon you, with my name tagged. My breath hitched, fingers shaking as I replied to Elena. Not true, handling it. But the interference stung, a deliberate sabotage to pressure me professionally. Then the calls started, blocked numbers, heavy breathing, one whispering, "Sell or suffer." I blocked them, but they came from new ones, my phone vibrating relentlessly on the table like an angry hornet. Pacing the living room now, the rug soft under my bare feet, I stopped at the window, pressing my forehead against the cool glass, city lights twinkling below. Invasion of privacy hit next, a notification from my credit app. Unusual activity. Logging in, my password hand-typed carefully revealed inquiries I hadn't made, dipping my score. Were they digging into my finances for the suit? The thought chilled me, my reflection in the glass pale and drawn. This campaign wasn't random, it was orchestrated. My parents pulling strings to isolate and intimidate. I sank back onto the couch, gathering the lawsuit papers into a neat stack, my hands steadier now with rising anger. The deepest humiliation wasn't the dinner. It was this, their willingness to destroy me legally and personally. But as I set the documents aside, a plan flickered. Consult a lawyer, dig deeper. They thought I'd fold. Instead, this notice lit a fire, turning their attack into my turning point. That fire smoldered through a sleepless night. The lawsuit papers spread across my coffee table like a map of enemy territory, edges curling slightly from the humidity in the air. I sat cross-legged on the floor, laptop balanced on my knees, the screen's glow casting blue shadows on my face as I typed furiously into a search bar. How to respond to family lawsuit. My fingers paused over the keys, hovering before hitting enter, the click echoing in the quiet apartment. Links populated the screen, legal advice forums and attorney directories, but my mind raced ahead. Dig deeper, I'd thought earlier. And now, with dawn creeping through the blinds in faint gray streaks, that's exactly what I did. Coffee mug in hand, steam curling up and fogging my glasses, I sipped the bitter brew, wincing at the heat on my tongue, and dove into my financial records, pulling up bank statements and credit reports I'd long ignored in the rush of daily life. What started as a defensive check turned into a horrifying revelation, each click uncovering layers of betrayal that shifted everything, exposing not just their lawsuit, but a web of deceit that had been spinning for years. I started simple, logging into my online banking app, the password entered with deliberate taps, my birthday backward plus a special character for security. The dashboard loaded, transactions listed in neat rows, but something nagged at me. Unfamiliar charges from months back, small at first, like drips before a flood. I scrolled back, my mouse wheel whirring softly, eyes narrowing at entries from a credit card I rarely used, loans approved in my name dispersed to accounts I didn't recognize. My heart quickened, a flutter in my chest as I clicked on one. A personal loan for $15,000 dated last year, right around when Brittany's second business flopped. The approval notice referenced co-signers. My parents' names popped up in the fine print. Co-signers? I'd never agreed to that. My free hand reached for the mug again, but it trembled, coffee sloshing over the rim onto my pajama pants, the warmth seeping through fabric to skin. I set it down hastily, the ceramic clunking against the table, and wiped the spill with my sleeve, fabric bunching up. Deeper now, I pulled my credit report from the 3 major bureaus, fingers flying across the keyboard to request instant access, the loading bar inching forward agonizingly slow. As the PDF downloaded, I paced the room, bare feet padding on the rug, arms crossed tight over my chest to quell the rising nausea. The file opened, pages dense with data, and I scanned hungrily, zooming in on the liabilities section. There they were, multiple loans, totaling over $50,000, all in my name but originated from Indiana IP addresses, my parents' home. One for $20,000, used for home improvements, but I knew their house hadn't changed in years. Another for $10,000, labeled education, yet Brittany had dropped out ages ago. My breath caught, a sharp inhale that made my throat tighten, and I sank back to the floor, scrolling with frantic swipes. Hard inquiries littered the report, dinging my score, each one a fingerprint of their intrusion. They'd forged my signature digitally, used my social security number, stolen from old tax forms I'd left at their house. The realization hit like a punch, my fist clenching involuntarily, nails cutting into palm. Evidence mounted as I cross-referenced. I opened email archives, searching for loan in the subject line, my cursor blinking impatiently. Notifications buried in spam. Approval emails I'd dismissed as phishing, but now, reading closely, they matched the report dates. One even had an attachment, a scanned application with my forged handwriting, the loops in the M too perfect, not my usual scrawl. I compared it to a sticky note on my fridge, my grocery list in Sharpie. Definitely not mine. My stomach twisted. A sour churn that made me press a hand to my abdomen, leaning forward until my forehead nearly touched the screen. How long? Since Brittany's first failed venture? The timeline aligned. Dips in my credit whenever she needed a bailout. They'd used me as a shadow bank, invisible funding for their golden child, while preaching family loyalty. The hypocrisy burned, hot and acrid in my thoughts, my jaw clenching until my teeth ached. But the deepest cut came with the call that followed, the one that cracked the facade wide open. My phone rang mid-morning, the screen showing my credit monitoring service, a fraud alert. I answered on the second ring, voice steady despite the quake inside. "This is Madison." The representative, a woman named Carla, spoke calmly. "We've detected suspicious activity. Multiple loans in your name. Do you authorize?" I gripped the phone tighter, knuckles whitening, the plastic creaking. "No, absolutely not." She walked me through it, her keyboard clacking in the background as she pulled records. "Originated by Linda and Richard Ellis? Relation?" "My parents," I whispered, the word tasting like ash. Carla paused, then, "This looks like identity theft. We recommend freezing your credit, filing a police report." Identity theft, by my own family. The term echoed, my free hand rubbing my forehead, fingers pressing hard against the skin as if to hold back the headache blooming there. Emboldened, I called my parents next, the decision impulsive but unstoppable. Dialing their landline, the rings stretched eternal, my foot tapping erratically on the floor. My mother answered, voice chipper at first. "Madison? Calling to apologize?" I ignored it, launching in. "The loans. In my name, you did this." Silence, then a stutter. "What? We needed help for Brittany. You weren't using your credit." My father's voice joined, muffled, "It's family money." The admission poured out, their scramble evident in rushed excuses. "Temporary, meant to pay back. You owe us for raising you." I stood now, pacing again, cordless phone to ear, my steps quick and sharp. "This is fraud. Illegal." Their tones shifted. Pleading, then angry. "Don't threaten us," Dad barked. "We'll drop the suit if you drop this," but the power had shifted. Their betrayal exposed. My voice grew calm, cold. "No, I'm countersuing. For everything." I hung up, the click final, my hand steady as I set the phone down. The discovery reframed it all. The lawsuit wasn't just greed, it was cover for their crimes, a preemptive strike. I gathered the evidence into a folder on my desktop, icons aligning neatly as I dragged files, a sense of control returning. This pivotal moment, this unearthing, turned victimhood to vengeance, satisfying, painful, but mine to wield. That sense of control, hard-won from piecing together their fraud like a puzzle on my screen, carried me through the next morning as I printed out the evidence. The printer whirring steadily in the corner of my living room, pages stacking with crisp efficiency. I stapled them together, the metal click punctuating my determination, and slipped the bundle into a manila folder, labeling it with a Sharpie in bold letters, "Countersuit Docs." My hand paused on the folder, ink smudging slightly under my thumb, as I glanced at the clock. 10 a.m. Time to meet my allies, the people who'd become my chosen family over years of quiet support. After hanging up on my parents last night, I texted my two closest friends, Sarah and Jamal, a simple need to talk. "Brunch?" Their replies came instantly. On my way from Sarah, "Be there in 20 from Jamal." Now, shoving the folder into my bag, I grabbed my keys, the jingle a small anchor, and headed out. The apartment door clicking shut behind me. The contrast to that toxic dinner couldn't have been starker. Where my biological family had wielded demands like weapons, these friends offered a lifeline, a genuine warmth that made the pain of betrayal feel survivable, even surmountable. The cafe was a short walk away, a cozy spot in Lincoln Park with outdoor tables under striped awnings, the air scented with fresh-baked croissants and brewing coffee. I arrived first, choosing a table in the sun, the metal chair cool against my legs as I sat, unfolding a napkin to fidget with. My bag rested at my feet, the folders weighed a reminder of the battle ahead, but for now I focused on the menu, tracing the laminated edges with my finger to steady my nerves. Sarah showed up moments later, her curly hair bouncing as she waved from across the street, dodging a cyclist with a quick step. She hugged me tight before sitting, her arms wrapping around my shoulders in a squeeze that lingered. "You look like you haven't slept," she said, pulling back to study my face, her brow furrowing with concern. No judgment, just care, already a world away from my mother's probing stares. Jamal arrived right after, sliding into the seat beside me with a grin, his backpack thumping to the ground. "Traffic was a beast, but I'm here. What's the emergency?" His voice was light, but his eyes searched mine, ready to shift gears. We ordered quickly. Avocado toast for me, eggs Benedict for Sarah, a stack of pancakes for Jamal, the waiter jotting it down with a nod before leaving us in privacy. I took a deep breath, the steam from my coffee mug rising between us, and laid it out, starting from the dinner's ultimatum. My hands gestured as I spoke, fingers clenching when I described the disownment, the way my mother's voice had sliced through the air. Sarah listened intently, her fork paused mid-air when our food arrived, while Jamal leaned forward, elbows on the table, nodding slowly. "They sued you?" Sarah whispered when I got to the certified mail, her eyes widening, hand reaching across to squeeze mine. Her touch was warm, grounding, unlike Brittany's cold smirks or my father's dismissive pats. I nodded, pulling the folder from my bag and sliding it over, pages fanning out slightly. And then this. The loans, identity theft, right under my nose. Jamal flipped through the documents, his brow creasing as he scanned the loan approvals, his finger tracing the forged signatures. "This is criminal, Mads, straight up fraud." He set the papers down gently as if they were fragile, and looked at me with steady eyes. "But you're not alone in this. What do you need? Lawyer Rex? I know a guy from my firm who's killer in civil cases." Sarah chimed in, pushing her plate aside untouched for the moment. "Or just vent? Cry? We've got all day." Their offers flowed naturally, no strings, no expectations of sacrifice, just support, pure and simple. I felt a lump in my throat, swallowing it down with a sip of coffee, the bitterness matching the ache but softened by their presence. At the family dinner, every word had been a minefield, laced with backhanded digs and escalating threats, the air thick with unspoken resentments. Here, the conversation breathed easy, laughter even bubbling up when Jamal joked, "Your sister's influencer gig? Please, I've seen better content from my cat." Sarah snorted, covering her mouth, and I managed a real smile, the first in days, my shoulders relaxing against the chair back. As we dug into the food, the plates clinking softly, the moment deepened into something healing. Sarah shared a story from her own family drama, her brother's endless bailouts mirroring Brittany's, her voice soft but animated, hands waving a fork for emphasis. "I cut ties last year, remember? Best decision. Found my people, like us." Jamal nodded, syrup dripping from his pancake as he cut into it. "Exactly. Blood doesn't mean obligation. You've built this life, your job, this apartment. They don't get to tear it down." Their words wrapped around me like a blanket, contrasting the cold exile from the steakhouse booth, where my refusal had been met with slammed accusations and glares. Here, my story was met with empathy, questions that probed gently. "How are you holding up?" from Sarah, her head tilting, eyes soft. "What's your next move?" from Jamal, practical but patient. I answered honestly, my voice gaining strength, detailing my plan to counter Sue, the evidence feeling solid now that I'd voiced it aloud. The brunch stretched lazily, the sun warming the table, passers-by chatting on the sidewalk, adding a lively backdrop. Sarah insisted on paying, waving off my protest with a hand flick. "My treat. You need the win today." Jamal walked me halfway home after, his arm linked through mine in easy camaraderie. "Call anytime, day or night," he said at the corner, hugging me goodbye. "We're your ride or dies." Back in my apartment, the door closing with a soft latch, I set the folder on the counter, the warmth from that gathering lingering in my chest. The toxic dinner had left me hollow, but this genuine moment with my true allies filled the voids, a stark reminder that family wasn't biology, it was choice, built on mutual respect and unwavering support. It fueled me forward, ready for the fight. That fuel from brunch with Sarah and Jamal propelled me straight into action the following afternoon. The folder of evidence now tucked under my arm as I pushed through the revolving door of a downtown Chicago law firm, the glass panels reflecting the bustling street behind me. The lobby was sleek, marble floors echoing my footsteps, a receptionist behind a polished desk glancing up with a professional smile. I'd called ahead that morning, my voice steady over the phone, as I scheduled a consultation with the lawyer Jamal recommended. A no-nonsense attorney named Carla Reyes, who specialized in family disputes and fraud cases. My bag bumped against my hip as I signed in, pen scratching across the clipboard, and I took a seat in the waiting area, flipping through a magazine without really seeing the pages, my mind replaying the plan: countersue, expose the identity theft, and set boundaries that couldn't be breached. The aftermath of the lawsuit and discoveries had been a whirlwind of escalating invasions, more harassing calls, emails from extended family guilting me, even a process server showing up at my office. But today, in this sterile office with the faint scent of coffee lingering, I was building my fortress, establishing rules of engagement that would protect my life from their chaos once and for all. The receptionist called my name after a short wait, her voice crisp, and I followed her down a hallway lined with framed diplomas, my heels muffled on the carpet. Carla's office was at the end, door ajar, and she stood to greet me, handshake firm, her dark hair pulled back in a neat bun. "Madison, come in. Jamal spoke highly of you." She gestured to a chair across from her desk, stacked with files but organized, a laptop open to a blank document. I sat, placing the folder in front of her, my fingers lingering on the tab as if reluctant to let go. "This is everything," I said, sliding it over, the paper whispering against the wood. She opened it immediately, eyes scanning the loan documents first, her brow furrowing slightly as she turned pages, pen tapping rhythmically against her notepad. I watched her reactions, a nod here, a there, my knee bouncing under the desk until I forced it still, crossing my legs instead. We dove in, the conversation focused and methodical, a far cry from the emotional ambushes of family dinners. "Identity theft by parents, uncommon but not unheard of," Carla said after reviewing the credit reports, leaning back in her chair, the leather creaking. "We can file a countersuit for fraud, emotional distress, and seek damages. Also freeze your credit immediately to stop further damage." Her words were practical, empowering, and I nodded, pulling out my phone to note the steps, thumbs typing quickly. But as she outlined the process, discovery phases, depositions, possible mediation, the invasions crept into the discussion. I told her about the anonymous tip to my work, my voice tightening as I described Elena's concerned email, the way it had made me second-guess every office interaction. Carla's pen paused. "That's harassment. We can add restraining orders, no contact clauses." She jotted notes, her handwriting sharp and efficient. The escalating invasions had intensified since the lawsuit notice, Brittany posting cryptic stories on Instagram, tagging me in comments like, "When family turns toxic, betrayed," her followers piling on with messages that flooded my inbox. My parents had emailed too, a long one from Mom laced with guilt. "We did what we had to for Brittany. You're tearing us apart." I'd deleted it unread at first, but curiosity made me fish it from trash, my cursor hovering before clicking. Reading it now, in hindsight, fueled my resolve. Then the workplace interference. A fake review on my firm's site claiming I was unreliable due to personal drama, traced back to an IP in Indiana. I'd spent hours with HR, explaining, my hands gesturing emphatically in that meeting room, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. And the privacy breaches. Someone, likely them, had tried accessing my online accounts, triggering security alerts that pinged my phone at odd hours, jolting me awake. Carla listened as I detailed it all, her expression shifting from neutral to steely. "This is systematic. We'll document everything, screenshots, call logs." I handed over my phone, scrolling to show the blocked numbers, the voicemails transcribed, "Sell the apartment or regret it." Her fingers drummed the desk as she reviewed. "New rules, no direct contact, all communication through me. Block them everywhere. Social, email, phone." I agreed, the weight lifting slightly as we mapped it out. She drafted a cease and desist letter on the spot, typing rapidly, the keys clacking. "This warns them, stop the harassment or face additional charges." Reading it over her shoulder, the language firm, immediate cessation of all contact, felt like armor, unbreakable. But establishing boundaries went beyond legalities. It was personal strategy too. As we wrapped up, Carla advising on next steps, filing by week's end, preparing for their response. I felt the shift inside, a quiet click like locking a door. Leaving her office, folder now thicker with her additions, I stopped at a coffee shop nearby, ordering a latte to go, the barista's steamer hissing as I paid. Sipping it on the walk home, foam clinging to my lip, I implemented the rules. On my phone, I blocked their numbers one by one, the screen confirming blocked with a satisfying pop-up. Social media next. Unfriended, account set to private, my thumb swiping decisively. At home I changed locks, the locksmith's drill whining as he installed new deadbolts. Key copies only for Sarah and Jamal. Even at work I set boundaries, a meeting with Elena explaining minimally, family issues handled legally, her nod understanding as she assured support. The invasions tried to persist. A bouquet delivered to my door with a card "May from your loving family, reconsider," which I tossed in the trash. Petals scattering. But with Carla's letter sent certified mail, their scramble began. A frantic voicemail from Dad deleted unheard. My countersuit filed days later, the clerk stamping it official solidified the fortress. Handling it all with strategic resolve, no emotional replies, just calculated moves, turned their pressure into my power. By evening, sitting on my couch with takeout fork-twirling noodles, I realized these new rules weren't walls to hide behind. They were gates I controlled, ensuring peace on my terms. That realization about boundaries as gates lingered into the weeks that followed, a quiet anchor as the legal machinery ground forward, depositions and filings stacking up like bricks in my fortress. Carla kept me updated with crisp emails, her attachments detailing their scrambling defenses, denials laced with more guilt trips, but I held firm, responding only through her, my replies typed out in measured sentences before hitting send. The countersuit built momentum, evidence mounting until the court date loomed, a circled mark on my calendar that stared back from the fridge door. On the morning of the hearing, I woke before my alarm, the city still dark outside my window, and lay there for a moment, sheets tangled around my legs from restless sleep. My hand reached out to silence the buzzing phone preemptively, fingers brushing the cool screen. This was it, the decisive moment where their actions would face judgment, and I'd reclaim not just my finances, but my narrative, turning the win into something bigger, a positive force that redefined what the Ellis name could mean on my terms. I dressed carefully, choosing a tailored gray suit that hugged my frame without apology, the fabric smooth under my palms as I buttoned the jacket. In the mirror, I adjusted my collar, tucking a stray hair behind my ear, my reflection steady-eyed despite the flutter in my chest. Breakfast was simple. Oatmeal stirred slowly in a bowl, spoon clinking against the ceramic as I ate standing at the counter, mind rehearsing key points from Carla's prep sessions. The cab ride to the courthouse was a blur of traffic lights and honks, my bag clutched in my lap, the folder inside now dog-eared from reviews. Stepping out onto the courthouse steps, the stone cold under my heels, I spotted Carla waiting, her briefcase in hand, waving me over with a nod. "Ready?" she asked, her voice low as we ascended together, my footsteps syncing with hers. I nodded, swallowing the dryness in my throat, the air inside the building heavy with polished wood and hushed voices. The courtroom was smaller than I'd imagined, rows of benches half filled with observers and other case parties, the judge's bench looming at the front like a sentinel. I took my seat beside Carla, the wooden chair creaking as I settled, my hands folding in my lap to hide the slight tremble. My family was across the aisle, Mom and Dad rigid in their seats, Brittany slouched beside them, her eyes flicking to me with a mix of defiance and unease. Their lawyer, a balding man in a rumpled suit, shuffled papers at his table, whispering urgently. The bailiff called the case, his voice booming, and we stood, my knees locking to steady myself. The judge, a stern woman with wire-rimmed glasses, peered over them as opening statements began. Carla laid it out methodically, her tone even, gesturing to exhibits projected on a screen, the forged loans, credit dips, harassment logs. Each slide clicked forward with a soft beep, illuminating their deceit in stark black and white. Their side countered weakly, their lawyer stammering about family misunderstandings, his hands gesturing vaguely, but the judge's interruptions grew sharper, her pen scratching notes furiously. Witnesses were called, a credit expert testifying to the fraud, his voice clinical as he pointed to discrepancies on the chart, my nod subtle in agreement. Then Brittany took the stand. her posture slumping as she twisted the narrative, claiming the loans were agreed upon, her fingers twisting a tissue in her lap, shreds falling like snow. Cross-examination dismantled it. Carla pressed gently but relentlessly. "Did Madison sign these?" Brittany's eyes darted to our parents, her voice faltering. "Well, not exactly." The admission hung, the courtroom silent, except for the judges shifting in her seat. My turn on the stand was the pivot, the air thick as I swore in, hand raised, the Bible's leather cool against my palm. Questions flowed. How I'd discovered the theft, the impact on my life. I spoke clearly, voice unwavering, describing the late nights rebuilding credit, the professional paranoia from their interference. "They took my identity to fund her mistakes," I said, glancing at Brittany, who looked away, her cheeks flushing. "Their lawyer tried to trip me, probing about family duty, but I met his gaze. Duty doesn't mean theft." Descending the stand, my heels clicking on the tile, a weight lifted, the truth aired like fresh air in a stale room. Closing arguments sealed it, Carla's summation powerful, her fist lightly tapping the podium for emphasis. "This isn't family, it's felony." Their side floundered, the lawyer's voice trailing. The judge recessed briefly, her gavel's crack echoing, and we waited in the hallway, my back against the wall, arms crossed, Carla checking her phone beside me, returning the tension peaked, everyone standing as she ruled, in my favor. Clear evidence of identity theft and harassment. Countersuit granted. Damages of $75,000, plus legal fees. Restraining order approved. The words landed like victory bells, my breath exhaling in a rush, shoulders sagging in relief. My family sat stunned, Mom's hand covering her mouth, Dad's face ashen, Brittany staring at the floor, her hands clenched in her lap. Outside, in the courthouse lobby, the wind crystallized into purpose. Carla hugged me briefly, her smile genuine. "You did it." But as I walked down the steps alone, the sun warming my face, wind tugging at my suit jacket, I felt the shift. Not just vindication, but opportunity. The damages would cover losses, but more. I'd channel them positively, reclaiming the Ellis name from their toxicity. That evening, back home, I sat at my desk, laptop open, the screen's glow soft as I researched. Fingers typing steadily, I set up a fund for identity theft victims, scholarships for financial literacy, named the Ellis Independence Initiative. The website builder dragged elements into place, my mouse clicking purposefully, logo a simple key symbolizing unlocked potential. Donating half the winnings anonymously at first, then publicly, I drafted a press release, words flowing, turning personal betrayal into communal strength. Sending it to local news, the email whooshing away, I leaned back, chair swiveling slightly, a quiet satisfaction blooming. This wasn't revenge, it was redefinition, using success to impact others overlooked like I'd been. The family name, once a chain, now a banner for resilience. Calls came in days later, interviews thanks from beneficiaries, but in that post-verdict moment, fork idle in my takeout from before, I knew. Independence secured, peace earned, legacy mine. That knowing settled deep in my bones as I pushed the takeout container aside, the noodles cooling untouched, and stood from the couch, stretching my arms overhead until my joints popped softly in the quiet apartment. The evening light slanted through the windows, painting the walls in warm oranges and pinks, a sunset that felt like a personal gift after the day's triumph in court. I wandered to the kitchen, running a glass under the faucet, the water rushing cold before I took a long sip, staring out at the city skyline that had become my constant companion. The verdict echoed in my mind, not just the judge's words, but the finality of it all, the way my family's stunned silence had filled the courtroom like an admission they couldn't voice. But as the water soothed my throat, a deeper reflection bubbled up, unbidden and profound, pulling me into a moment of pure internal reckoning. Sitting there on the bar stool, glass condensation dripping onto the counter in slow beads, I let myself sink into it, tracing the threads of my life back to their roots, realizing with crystal clarity that my worth had never been theirs to define, it was always inherently mine. It started with the small things, memories surfacing like bubbles in still water. I thought about that 8th birthday again, the blue ribbon crumpled in my pocket, ignored amid Brittany's dance recital plans. Back then, I'd internalized it as my failure, not shiny enough, not demanding enough attention. My fingers traced the rim of the glass, the cool edge grounding me as I recalled high school graduation, standing alone on the field after the ceremony, diploma in hand, while they rushed to Brittany's side for her almost achievements. I told myself I didn't need the spotlight, that quiet success was enough, but deep down, it chipped away, leaving me chasing validation in promotions, in that apartment purchase, in every late-night effort that screamed, "See me." Even the lawsuit, their ultimate betrayal, had been a twisted quest for their approval. By fighting back, I'd still been playing their game, measuring my value against their rejection. But now, in this solitary evening, the truth unfolded gently, like pages in a long-forgotten book. I set the glass down with a soft clink, leaning my elbows on the counter, chin in hands, eyes unfocused on the horizon. My worth wasn't in the court's ruling, though it vindicated me externally. It wasn't in the damages check that would arrive soon, or the initiative I'd launched to help others, noble as that was. No, it was internal, a quiet flame that had burned all along, independent of their favoritism or fraud. I closed my eyes, breathing deeply, the air filling my lungs with a rhythm that felt like affirmation. For years, I'd equated love with sacrifice, bending myself to fit their mold. But that was the lie. They'd taught me to seek peace in their acceptance, which was always conditional, always skewed toward Brittany. True peace came from releasing that, from recognizing that my achievements, my resilience, were self-sustained. The apartment around me, with its carefully chosen books on the shelves and the coffee mug ring on the table from mornings of solitary planning, was proof. I'd built this, without them, for me. The reflection deepened as night fell, the city lights twinkling on like stars in a personal constellation. I moved to the living room, curling up on the couch with a blanket draped over my legs, the fabric soft against my skin. Thoughts turned to the patterns I'd broken, not just legally, but emotionally. The harassment, the identity theft, they'd been desperate attempts to pull me back into their orbit, to make me doubt my independence. But in countersuing, in setting those boundaries, I'd affirmed that my value didn't hinge on fixing their messes or earning their pride. It was in the everyday choices. The promotion I'd chased on my own merit, the friends like Sarah and Jamal who'd chosen me without obligation, the quiet evenings where I read finance journals not for approval, but for my own growth. A smile tugged at my lips, small at first, then genuine, as I hugged my knees to my chest, the blanket shifting with a rustle. Self-validation wasn't a thunderclap. It was this serene acceptance that I was enough, flaws and strengths intertwined, without needing their echo. Tears came then, not from pain, but release. Warm tracks down my cheeks that I wiped away with the blanket's edge, no shame in the vulnerability. I thought of Brittany, still trapped in their cycle, her golden status a gilded cage of dependency. Pity flickered, but not responsibility. That was her path to navigate. My parents, facing accountability for the first time, might never change, but that wasn't my burden. Standing up, I walked to the window, pressing my palm against the glass, the cool surface contrasting the warmth inside me. The city pulsed below, alive and indifferent, mirroring my newfound freedom, vast, self-contained. Peace wasn't absence of conflict. It was this internal harmony, where their shade no longer dimmed my light. As the clock ticked past midnight, I turned off the lamps one by one, the rooms falling into soft darkness, and headed to bed, slipping under the covers with a sigh. The reflection crystallized there, in the quiet before sleep. My worth was internal, a wellspring that flowed regardless of external storms. Finding true peace meant embracing that, letting it guide me forward, unanchored from their expectations. For the first time, I drifted off not in defiance or hurt, but in wholeness, the future open, and mine. So have you ever had to cut ties with family to find your own peace? It's a tough road, but one that can lead to real freedom. I finally stood up for myself, countersued, and turned their betrayal into something positive, not just for me, but for others facing similar struggles. Looking back, it wasn't about revenge. It was about reclaiming my life and realizing my value comes from within, not from anyone else's approval. What about you? Have you dealt with family favoritism or identity theft? Share your stories in the comments below. I'd love to hear how you've navigated those challenges and come out stronger. Your experiences might help someone else feeling overlooked or trapped right now. So what do you think? Did I fight back enough, or should I have done more? Drop a comment below, like if this resonated, And don't forget to subscribe for more real-life stories of triumph and self-discovery. Remember, your worth is yours to define. Own it, protect it, and let it shine. Thanks for listening.